Karen demands farmers market remove dirty root vegetables. Vendors chatted from their neatly arranged stalls, the air buzzing with cheerful conversation and the scent of herbs, jam, and baked bread. Shoppers in floppy hats and linen pants strolled the open-air aisles with canvas totes slung over shoulders, exchanging friendly greetings with farmers and local artisans. A string quartet played softly under a striped tent near the fountain, setting the idyllic tone of the morning, until it was all shattered by the screech of rubber wheels on pavement and a voice sharp enough to pierce a beat. Karen marched into the market like she owned it, pushing a pink dog stroller with a pampered teacup poodle inside wearing a rhinestone tutu and a sun hat. Her own outfit matched with the same deliberate intention: white capris, oversized sunglasses, and a bedazzled visor that screamed Homeowners Association Enforcer. She eyed the rustic wooden signage and hand-chalked prices with thinly veiled contempt, muttering under her breath about lack of standards and hippie nonsense, while scanning for something familiar. She had come for local honey and maybe lavender bath bombs, but her stroll was cut short the moment she rounded the corner and laid eyes on a display of root vegetables. A bounty of carrots, parsnips, beets, and potatoes sat proudly on the stand, vibrant in color and unmistakably fresh. So fresh, in fact, that clumps of dark soil clung to their rough skins. Some of the beets even had their leafy tops still attached, curling in the breeze like green ribbons waving her over. Karen recoiled as if someone had waved a bag of garbage in her face. "Excuse me," she cried, raising her voice to unnatural volume while pointing an accusing finger at the stall. "What is this? Why is this produce dirty?" The vendor, a kind-faced woman named Carla with dirt-streaked hands and a sunburned neck, looked up from where she was rearranging cucumbers. "Morning, those are freshly harvested," she said with a smile. "We just pulled them yesterday. The dirt actually helps them stay fresh longer." Karen gasped audibly, stepping back as if the word dirt had physically struck her. "This is unsanitary. Do you even wash your produce before you try to sell it to innocent people?" Carla blinked. "Ma'am, this is a farmer's market. A lot of customers want unwashed root veggies so they last longer at home. And besides, a good rinse before cooking is all it takes." "That's not the point," Karen snapped, arms crossed over her chest like she was filing a mental complaint report. "In a real store, produce is washed, bagged, and labeled. This is straight from the ground. You're selling vegetables with earth still on them. That's practically a health violation." The poodle yipped in agreement, or perhaps just because of the rising pitch of Karen's voice, but she took it as a sign of solidarity and huffed loudly enough for half the market to glance in her direction. Shoppers nearby subtly tried to skirt around her, sensing the storm brewing. A young couple holding iced coffees rolled their eyes and ducked behind a row of hanging herbs. An older man with a straw hat and overalls, stacking baskets of corn across the way, watched with quiet amusement. Carla, to her credit, remained composed. "We grow everything organically, no pesticides, and the soil's clean and healthy. That's part of the appeal." "It's disgusting," Karen shot back, now drawing the attention of at least 3 more vendors and a teenager manning a honey stand who had started recording on his phone. "Do you even know what kind of bacteria could be lurking in that dirt? E. coli, botulism, tetanus probably. What if a child touches that and then rubs their eyes? What if my dog licks it?" She dramatically pulled the stroller closer as though the mere presence of root vegetables might infect her dog through proximity. Carla's polite tone didn't waver, though her smile had grown a bit tight. "I've been farming for 20 years, ma'am. We've never had a complaint. Our customers are fine with the dirt. It's natural." "Well, I'm not fine with it," Karen announced, her voice now projecting all the way to the adjacent flower stall. "I'll be speaking to whoever's in charge of this entire circus. This place needs regulations, inspections, quality control. Do you even have hand-washing stations here? Health and safety should be mandatory. This is a public market, not some backwater roadside stand." Carla raised an eyebrow, finally allowing a bit of weariness to show. "You're welcome to take that up with the market manager. He's over near the baked goods in the red apron. But I'm telling you now, the produce isn't going to change just because you don't like a little dirt." Karen wheeled around so abruptly that her dog nearly tumbled from the stroller, barking with startled outrage. She made a beeline for the baked goods tent, heels clacking against the cobblestones like the warning drums of war. The crowd parted in her wake, whispers swirling. "What was that about?" someone asked. "She mad about dirt," another muttered. At the baked goods tent, Steve, the farmer's market manager, a soft-spoken man in his 50s wearing a faded cap and sun-cracked red apron, was calmly slicing banana bread samples. Karen descended upon him like a locust swarm. "This market is in violation of multiple health codes," she declared before he could greet her. "Vendors are selling vegetables covered in dirt. No washing, no packaging, no labeling. It's a public hazard. I demand immediate action." Steve looked up, blinking slowly as if replaying her words to make sure he'd heard correctly. "You mean the root veggies?" "Yes, the filthy root vegetables," she hissed. "My dog is traumatized. That woman back there is selling compost. I could have stepped in it. This entire market could be shut down." Steve let out a slow breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "Ma'am, I understand your concerns, but we're a farmer's market. These vegetables are harvested locally and brought in the day before. They're meant to be fresh from the ground. It's how things have always been done." "Then you've been doing it wrong this entire time," Karen fumed. "This ends today. I will not rest until this market meets modern standards. Starting tomorrow, every vegetable needs to be washed, bagged, sanitized, and displayed in a respectable manner, or I'll take it to the town council myself." She turned dramatically and stormed off down the aisle, muttering threats about petitions, social media exposés, and writing letters to every news outlet in the county. Behind her, Steve sighed and returned to his banana bread, knowing exactly what kind of week he was about to have. The quiet hum of the market resumed, but now all eyes were watching the woman with the sparkly visor and her poodle-shaped fury. The next morning arrived cloaked in a humid haze, but that didn't stop Karen from arriving 30 minutes before the farmer's market opened, armed with a clipboard, 3 Sharpies, and a bulging handbag filled with freshly printed petitions. She had stayed up half the night writing them, after a long, dramatic Facebook Live where she'd warned her followers of a widespread agricultural scandal in our own backyard, and she was now prepared for what she grandly called her vegetable safety campaign. She stood near the entrance, a folding camping chair set behind her like a throne of purpose, with a large poster board sign leaning against it. "Say no to dirty produce. Demand a sanitary market now." Her poodle, Miss Twinkles, sat beside her in the stroller with a tiny picket sign attached to the canopy that read, "Clean Veggies Matter." Karen had printed it using glitter markers and was particularly proud of the pun. It didn't take long for her presence to disrupt the calm setup of the morning. Vendors who had just started arranging their produce looked up as Karen began waving her clipboard at passing joggers and dog walkers. "Excuse me, are you a supporter of public health? Then please sign this petition to ban unsanitary produce from our market," she called out, blocking the footpath with the clipboard thrust out like a sword. One man with earbuds pretended not to hear her. Another politely declined and kept walking, but Karen wasn't deterred. She pounced on a young couple with a toddler, cooing at the child before pivoting to a firm voice. "You know, kids are especially vulnerable to soil bacteria. One wrong bite and you're in the ER. Do you want that on your conscience?" The couple excused themselves and walked faster. Karen turned her attention to a trio of older women in tennis gear who looked like prime candidates for outrage. "Ladies, good morning. Did you know this market sells vegetables straight from the ground? With dirt, visible dirt." She handed them flyers from her handbag, the pages still warm from the overworked home printer. "It's a health risk. I'm starting a movement to clean this place up, and I'd be honored if you join the cause." The women exchanged amused glances, and one of them raised an eyebrow. "You mean like potatoes?" "Yes, potatoes, carrots, beets, all completely covered in soil. It's grotesque. What if someone touches that and then samples a muffin? Or what if a child thinks it's candy and eats it? It's a lawsuit waiting to happen. But isn't that how they grow? Another woman asked, puzzled. Karen stiffened. That's beside the point. This is about presentation, about hygiene. When you shop at a grocery store, everything is washed, labeled, and safely packaged. That's what we should demand here. We deserve better than this peasant-style nonsense. That last comment drew a sharp laugh from one of the women, who politely handed back the flyer. Good luck with that, she said, and they walked away, leaving Karen standing with her jaw clenched and her Sharpie poised for signatures that never came. But she didn't give up. She repositioned herself near the busiest stall, Elia's stand, which boasted a colorful spread of vegetables with lush green tops still attached, and just enough dirt on their skins to signal real freshness. People had already begun to line up, chatting casually and comparing recipes. Karen saw an opportunity and moved in like a hawk. Hello everyone, quick question while you wait. Do you know what's actually on those carrots? Because I do. Microbial hazards. This stand is selling produce with dirt clinging to it, literal dirt and no warning labels. I'm collecting signatures for a petition to require all market vendors to meet basic sanitation standards. It's for your health and safety. Please sign. Elias, who was handing a bag of rainbow chard to a smiling elderly man, turned at the sound of her voice. His calm expression didn't change, though his brow lifted ever so slightly. Karen, he said, his tone neutral but firm, you can't block my customers from shopping. You're welcome to stand nearby, but please give people space. I have every right to warn people of potential risks, Karen replied, her voice sharpening. You may be fine wallowing in the mud like some backwoods gremlin, but some of us have standards. And children shop here, seniors, immunocompromised people. A woman behind her whispered to her friend, "Is she for real?" and took a deliberate step away. Elias sighed and stepped out from behind his stall. Karen, I grow these vegetables with care. The dirt's part of nature, and anyone concerned is welcome to wash their veggies at home, like people have done for generations. If you really want to help the community, maybe buy some produce and show others how to prep it safely. Karen let out a laugh so sharp it startled Miss Twinkles into yapping. Oh, please, as if I'd let something from this filthy table anywhere near my kitchen. This isn't a rustic film set, it's a suburban town. People here expect standards. You farmers need to learn that. It was then that Karen's arm caught a basket of parsnips perched at the edge of the stall. It wasn't clear if she meant to knock it or if her flailing gestures just got away from her, but the result was the same. The basket tumbled to the cobblestones, parsnips scattering across the walkway in a clatter that turned heads all across the market. Elias immediately bent to pick them up, but Karen backed away, loudly accusing. He shoved me. He tried to push me away from the stall. The accusation rang out like a bell. Several people nearby stopped and stared. One of them, the teenager from the honey booth who had filmed her rant the previous day, lifted his phone again and hit record. I did not shove you, Elias said evenly, still crouching to gather the fallen produce. You knocked that over yourself. You touched me. You absolutely brushed against me. That's assault. Someone call the police. Karen shrieked, backing into a family with a stroller and knocking over a crate of squash from the next booth. Steve, the market manager, arrived seconds later, summoned by the rising volume of voices and the unmistakable chaos that followed Karen wherever she went. He saw Elias calmly returning parsnips to their basket and Karen fuming, cheeks flushed red and eyes wild behind her sunglasses. Karen, he said, tone weary already, what happened now? I was attacked, she declared. He shoved me when I tried to warn people about the filthy state of this produce. I have witnesses. I want the police called. This market is a breeding ground for disease and now violence. Steve turned to Elias, who shrugged. She knocked over the basket herself. There are people filming. I didn't touch her. Don't lie, Karen snapped. I felt your arm. At that moment, the teen with the phone called out, I got the whole thing on video. He didn't touch her. She hit the basket and then screamed. Karen froze, lips parting, and for the first time since she'd arrived that morning, she hesitated. Steve rubbed his temples and sighed. Karen, you need to step aside and let the market function. You're disrupting business again. If you don't calm down, I'll have to ask you to leave. Karen's nostrils flared. I will not be silenced. I'll be back tomorrow, and this time I'll bring backup. You'll all see. And with that, she turned and stormed off through the market, her poodle barking and her flyers fluttering in the wind, leaving a mess of root vegetables and bruised egos in her wake. The crowd slowly resumed their shopping, but the tension lingered, and Elias, wiping his hands on his apron, simply muttered, "She's going to escalate this, isn't she?" He was right. By the time the sun crested over the rooftops on Saturday morning, the tranquil charm of the suburban farmers' market had been replaced with a buzz of anticipation more akin to a political rally than a morning of artisanal bread and seasonal produce. Word had spread fast over the past 24 hours, not through official channels, but via the wildfire of social media, where Karen's latest tirade had become a spectacle. Her Facebook Live video, where she sobbed dramatically about being violently assaulted by a beat-wielding brute, had racked up thousands of views. She had added theatrical pauses, clutched missed twinkles as if she were in mourning, and spoke of the farmer's market as if it were a crime scene. But what she didn't realize, or perhaps refused to acknowledge, was that most of the commenters weren't supporting her crusade. They were laughing. Memes had already started circulating. One featured a beat with a face and arms holding a sign that said, "I assaulted Karen." Another stitched together footage of her shouting about soil-based bioterrorism, with horror movie soundtracks in the background. Karen, of course, interpreted this attention as proof of her growing influence. She returned to the market not with one clipboard but with 5, all dangling from a foldable cart she wheeled beside her dog stroller. She was flanked by 2 women from her HOA, Alina and Ruth, who had reluctantly agreed to support her activism after being bombarded with messages all week. They walked stiffly behind her, both holding laminated signs, Karen's doing, that read "Clean veggies equals clean health," and "Don't let the dirt in." Neither looked thrilled. Alina, in fact, had brought a travel mug of wine and was sipping it discreetly. Karen, however, was radiant with purpose, marching toward the market's central path with the confidence of a woman who believed she was moments away from being on the local news. But she wasn't the only one preparing for a showdown. Elias, after days of fielding questions, side-eyes and snide comments from a small but vocal slice of the town, had decided it was time to respond, not with anger or confrontation, but with humor and community spirit. His stall, usually modest with just a few hand-painted signs, was now decorated with bunting made of twine and laminated photos of vegetables in all their glorious, dirty splendor. Dirt, nature's protective coating, was written on a banner above his display. His prices included bonuses like free dirt with every turnip, and beat the system. Customers loved it. People lined up in droves, laughing, taking pictures, and purchasing veggies with more enthusiasm than usual. Someone even brought a ukulele and began strumming a silly protest song in support of soil. The vibe was lighthearted but defiant, a small act of resistance wrapped in compostable bags and bunches of kale. Karen saw none of it as funny. "This is exactly what I was warning everyone about," she declared, passing through the crowd like a ship through fog, handing flyers to bewildered shoppers and shoving clipboards into their hands. "They're making a mockery of public health. This is a campaign of agricultural misinformation, and now they're trying to intimidate me with jokes. Disgraceful." Her voice was theatrical, elevated, meant for cameras. And conveniently, a local blogger had shown up to interview Elias and had already begun recording the spectacle. The confrontation reached a tipping point when Karen marched directly to Elias' booth, this time ignoring the line of customers. She squeezed through, flanked by her HOA friends who by now were visibly wilting in the heat and embarrassment, and planted herself in front of the display with arms crossed. "This entire setup is a violation of health codes," she said, speaking loud enough to draw a small circle of onlookers. "And your sarcasm is legally defamatory. I have screenshots." Elias, leaning on a wooden crate with a grin, gave her a measured look. "Karen, we're just having some fun. No one's trying to intimidate you." "Oh, please," she snapped. "You've weaponized humor against a citizen's genuine concern. This is slander. You think you can throw mud and hide behind your pitchfork. I've spoken with a lawyer. This is harassment." "You came to my stall, Karen," Elias replied, still calm but firmer now. "You've been yelling at my customers all morning. If anyone's harassing someone, it's you." She turned to the crowd, desperate to reclaim control. "Everyone here is being lied to. Dirt on vegetables harbors bacteria, parasites, poison. Children could get sick. You're all just too brainwashed by the rustic aesthetic to realize you're eating contaminated filth." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Someone in the crowd coughed. A child asked, "What's a parasite?" and was swiftly hushed by a parent. Then a voice from the back called out, "Karen, it's just dirt." A ripple of laughter followed, cutting through the tension like a blade. More voices joined in, not cruel but amused, tired, and clearly not buying what Karen was selling. "This isn't over," Karen hissed, her smile faltering. "You people think this is a joke, but I'll show you. I'm filing a complaint with the town council. I'm suing for damages. This market will burn before I let it become a public health hazard." As she stormed off with her clipboards rattling and her dog's little sign drooping in the breeze, a young man with a camera stepped out of the crowd and asked Elias for a comment. Elias just shrugged and picked up a particularly grubby beet. "You want a statement," he said, holding it up. "This is real food, and if a little dirt scares you more than pesticide residue or grocery store chemicals, maybe the problem isn't the beet." The clip went viral. By the afternoon, #beat the system was trending. Videos of Karen's shouting match were stitched with slow-motion replays of her flyers flying through the air, set to dramatic opera music. Teenagers began duetting it with gardening tips. Local teens created mock petitions with joke titles like "Ban Oxygen in Lettuce" and "Demand Soap-Resistant Tomatoes." The story spread beyond the suburb and into the wider digital consciousness where no HOA influence could reach. It was no longer about Karen and some carrots. It was now about a woman's crusade against the natural world, and how the natural world, backed by a bunch of farmers and a public tired of unnecessary outrage, decided to push back. Karen, watching this unfold from the sanctuary of her well-manicured lawn, refreshed her social media feed obsessively, trying to find an angle where she was the hero. But the narrative had slipped from her hands like a muddy potato, and no amount of petitions or pearl-clutching could wash that off. And deep in the comment sections of every post, amidst all the laughter and veggie memes, one message echoed louder than the rest: "Let the carrots stay dirty." Monday morning dawned cloudy, the kind of gray sky that seemed to flatten everything beneath it, dulling the colors of the market banners and muting the cheerful hues of fresh produce and handmade crafts. The mood in the town, however, was anything but flat. Whispers of the weekend's chaos still rippled through neighborhood group chats, coffee shop counters, and yoga class warm-ups. Karen's antics had spilled out of the farmer's market and into the greater suburban consciousness like beet juice staining a white blouse. Everyone had an opinion. Some whispered their amusement with a smirk, others muttered disapproval at her behavior, and many just wanted their quiet weekend shopping back. But for Karen, this was war, and she had no intention of letting a little public ridicule slow her crusade. Quite the opposite. She believed the attention, no matter how sarcastic, was proof that her campaign had struck a chord, and she was determined to escalate. At the center of this escalation was a hastily organized emergency town council meeting, requested by Karen herself. She had emailed, called, and even showed up unannounced at the council secretary's house with a binder full of evidence that included blown-up screenshots from social media, printed comments she labeled as threats, and several soil sample photos she had no idea how to interpret but presented anyway. In her petition, which included only 19 signatures, 5 of which were duplicates signed under variations of her own name, she demanded the immediate enforcement of cleanliness regulations at the farmers' market and an investigation into what she called botanical malpractice by Elias and other vendors. To her surprise, the council had agreed to hear her out, perhaps more out of morbid curiosity or community pressure than actual concern. Word spread quickly, and by the time the meeting convened inside the multi-purpose room of the community center, it was standing room only. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly as Karen took the microphone at the podium, a manila folder clutched in her perfectly manicured hands, her pearl earrings trembling with the force of her indignation. Behind her sat the 5 council members, visibly weary already, their eyes reflecting a blend of bureaucratic patience and existential dread. A row of folding chairs held members of the public, including Elias in a clean plaid shirt, sitting with his arms folded and a faint smile beneath his beard. Several other farmers were there too, as were half a dozen reporters, their cameras focused and ready. At least one teenage boy with a phone already live-streaming the meeting whispered to his friend, "She's gonna lose it again. Bet." Karen cleared her throat, tapped the mic as if she were opening a Senate hearing, and launched into her monologue. "Esteemed council members, concerned citizens and followers of public health and safety, I stand before you not out of personal grievance, but as a representative of the countless families who visit our farmers' market each week, trusting it to provide safe, sanitary, and dignified food options. What I witnessed this past weekend, and what many of you have likely seen shared across social media, was not only a disgrace, it was a danger." She opened the folder and began sliding pages onto the overhead projector, though the images were crooked and barely legible. "This is a photo of a beet, unwashed, with visible earth matter still clinging to it. Do you know what lurks in that dirt? E. coli, listeria, botulism spores. This is a child's nightmare waiting to happen. And yet our market not only condones this, it celebrates it. I was mocked, insulted, even physically endangered for simply advocating for basic health standards. This is no longer a debate about vegetables. This is a public health crisis." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Someone coughed to cover their laughter. A woman in the back whispered, "Does she think dirt is a bioweapon?" Karen's voice sharpened. "I demand this council immediately mandate the washing, packaging, and labeling of all produce sold in the market. Anything less is negligence. I also request a formal reprimand issued to the vendor known as Elias for encouraging the public to consume unregulated, soil-covered goods, and for leading a smear campaign against me, a private citizen, trying to do the right thing." The council chair, a woman named Janice with the hardened patience of a woman who'd served 20 years listening to PTA feuds and dog park disputes, cleared her throat. "Thank you, Mrs. Grayson. We will now open the floor to response." Elias stood slowly, approached the podium, and adjusted the mic with the same ease he'd used to lift a crate of rutabagas. His voice was steady, not raised, but carried through the room with the weight of sincerity. "I've been farming for over 3 decades, he began, "and what I grow is what my grandparents grew, without chemicals, without plastic packaging, and yes, sometimes with a little dirt still on the skin. Not because we're lazy, but because that's how food comes out of the earth. The dirt on a beet isn't poison, it's nature's way of keeping it fresh. We encourage people to rinse produce at home just like their parents did. It's honest work, clean work, and frankly, I think people are smart enough to know how to wash a carrot." He paused, letting the quiet settle. "As for the accusations, I never laid a hand on Mrs. Grayson. I've got dozens of witnesses and videos to prove it. What I did do, what we all did, was laugh. Because sometimes when someone tries to turn common sense into a scandal, the only thing you can do is laugh." The audience broke into light applause, and even a few of the council members cracked small smiles. Karen turned red, fuming in her seat. She whispered furiously to a leaner, who now looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Next, a woman named Maria stood. She owned a health food store in town and frequently volunteered with nutrition programs at local schools. I buy from Elias and vendors like him because I know where their food comes from. I've toured the farms. I teach kids how to wash and prep root vegetables. This fear-mongering isn't about safety, it's about control. If someone doesn't like unwashed produce, they're welcome to shop elsewhere. But don't tell the rest of us we're too stupid to handle a potato. More applause. The mood shifted entirely. The council looked at each other, whispered, then Janice leaned forward to speak. After reviewing the incident and hearing from all parties, we see no reason to impose further restrictions on the farmers' market. Washing produce is the responsibility of the consumer. We trust our vendors. And as for the accusations of misconduct, there is no evidence to support a reprimand. This matter is closed. Karen sprang to her feet. "You're ignoring a public health emergency," she screamed, her voice echoing. "This entire town is corrupted. You'll regret this. I'll go to the state board. I'll contact the news. Ma'am," Janice said firm now, "this meeting is adjourned." Karen tried to say more, but her voice was drowned out by a wave of murmurs and shuffling feet as people stood and began to exit, many of them chatting with Elias, clapping him on the back, or posing for photos near the "Dirt Don't Hurt" sign still on their phones. Karen stood alone, the weight of her folder feeling heavier than ever, watching the town rally not around her but against her. For once, she had no words. Only the sound of a gavel echoing in her ears as the lights above her flickered one final time. Saturday marked the return of the farmers' market after a week of viral headlines, media coverage, memes, and council chamber drama, and yet the scene unfolding in the suburban town center was more alive and joyful than it had been in months. Vendors arrived early to set up their booths, many adding playful decorations to commemorate the week's absurd events, banners reading "Rooted in Dirt, Grown in Truth," puns scrawled in chalk on signs, and vegetable-themed buttons pinned to aprons. Children wore hand-drawn beet masks. Dogs strutted with miniature protest signs saying, "Let me sniff the turnips," and several high schoolers arrived in coordinated outfits of brown overalls and fake soil smears, pretending to be organic enforcement officers. The entire atmosphere buzzed with humor and rebellion, a celebration not just of produce, but of sanity prevailing. Elias, arriving with a fresh load of carrots and beets still showing proud clumps of earth, was met with applause from early shoppers. Someone handed him a coffee and a locally printed t-shirt that read, "I got assaulted by a beet, and all I got was this t-shirt." He chuckled, shaking his head as he unpacked his crates, his presence now something of a local legend. A reporter from a lifestyle magazine had emailed him asking for an interview, and a small YouTube channel had requested a tour of his farm. But Elias wasn't interested in fame. He just wanted to get back to doing what he loved, selling honest food to honest people without being screamed at by a woman with a clipboard. That woman, for her part, was nowhere to be seen. Karen had not returned to the market, not since the explosive conclusion of the town council meeting where her demands had been dismissed, and her credibility publicly deflated like an overripe zucchini. Her petition had stalled out at 19 signatures. Her Facebook page, once flooded with activity, had gone quiet after her last live video. An angry, mascara-streaked monologue about small-town corruption and agricultural conspiracies was universally mocked. Her HOA had distanced themselves, politely suggesting she step down from organizing next month's community potluck. Even Ruth and Alina, her once loyal shadows, had ghosted her texts. Miss Twinkles had developed a stress-related rash. In the span of 7 days, Karen had gone from self-proclaimed community watchdog to the unintentional mascot of overreaction. Yet she still believed, in some small part of her, that she had been right. That belief clung to her as she sat alone at her kitchen table that Saturday morning, sipping lukewarm herbal tea from a mug that read, "Don't be salty," a gift from her niece who'd always had a flair for irony. Karen watched the market from her window through binoculars, hunched behind her blinds like a detective on a stakeout. She had no intention of going down there, not after what they'd done to her, not after the public humiliation, but she still wanted to see what they were saying, how they were behaving. Surely someone was grateful for her efforts. Surely someone would notice that none of the produce was covered in as much dirt this time. Surely someone would realize she had tried to help. But no one did. What she saw through her binoculars was laughter, long lines at Elia's booth, children getting stickers shaped like radishes, someone painting carrots on people's cheeks. No signs of illness, no chaos. Just a town enjoying its weekend, united not in fear but in mockery of the one person who tried to divide them. The truth settled heavily in her chest like overcooked squash. She had lost, completely and publicly, and there was no salvaging it. Back at the market, Elias was approached by Janice from the town council, who handed him a neatly folded letter. "Official recognition," she said with a smile, "for being a patient human being and a good sport." Elias opened it to reveal a faux certificate titled Defender of Dirt, signed by the mayor. Beneath it was a voucher for a free massage at the local spa. He laughed louder than he had in days and raised the certificate above his head to a round of cheering from those close enough to see. Not far from his stall, a local artist was selling sketches of the week's events. One depicted Karen with a megaphone standing on a potato crate, her mouth a comic swirl of indignation, while Elias leaned on a shovel with a beet in one hand and a raised eyebrow. Another showed Miss Twinkle's launching out of her stroller, fangs bared, captioned "The Great Root Rebellion." They sold fast. At noon, the town's food truck association pulled into the square offering Karen-inspired specials. The angry parsnip wrap came with extra dirt-colored seasoning and a complimentary baby wipe. The Twinkle tacos featured organic radish slaw guaranteed to trigger suburban watchdogs. Lines curled around the block, laughter spilled into the streets, and for once people talked to strangers with smiles instead of suspicion. The crisis had become catharsis. And amidst it all, Elias took a break from his booth and wandered toward the music tent where a bluegrass trio was playing a lively version of "This Land Is Your Land," the fiddles dancing over the chatter of the crowd. He looked around at the faces, old, young, grumpy, giggling, indifferent, and saw a community not broken by drama but bonded by how they'd weathered it. Even when things had gotten ridiculous, even when one woman had tried to turn soil into scandal, they had held onto their good sense, their humor, and their love of honest things. That was something worth being proud of. As the market wound down in the late afternoon sun, vendors packed their unsold produce, artists collected their cash boxes, and the food trucks revved up to leave, full of grease and glory. The town center returned slowly to its usual rhythm, but something lingered, not tension, not irritation, something warmer. A shared joke, an inside story, a mutual understanding that no matter how loud someone shouted, they couldn't uproot what was already firmly planted. Back at her house, Karen finally lowered her binoculars and closed the blinds. She looked at the stack of unused flyers on her kitchen table, then at the framed inspirational quote on her wall, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." She snorted bitterly and flipped the frame face down. Outside, the wind carried the faintest hint of rosemary and garlic from the market below, and for the first time in days she said nothing. No rant, no new plan, no threats, just silence. The dirt had settled, and the beets were still selling.